Welcome to the Mad Singers Management Podcast from madsingers.com, where entrepreneurs and business managers learn and share. If you like the show, don't forget to leave a review.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Today I have with me Anfernee. Welcome to the show, man.
Glad to be here, Mads.
Pleasure to have you. So Anfernee, for the people who don't yet know you, would you mind doing a brief introduction about yourself and what you do and so on?
Sure. I'll give you the briefest version I can. Essentially, I'm an entrepreneur. I manage a remote team right now with my wife, who's the co-founder of our current startup called Founders Connect. And I also manage, for one of my clients, I'm managing their growing marketing department. And I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But essentially, my background is in IT. I spent 6 years, just about 6 years working as a call center manager for Hewlett-Packard. So the printing, computer company based in Sydney. Did that for a number of years, and then I went from taking calls in the service desk to then managing a team of 10 staff on location, and then within 2 years, that entire team was transitioned or outsourced to India, and then I naturally went into a project manager role, and then went over to India and spent some time over there in Bangalore training up the new team to replace the team that I had in Sydney, which was both exciting and also both challenging, because obviously I had relationships with every single person that worked for me, and I had to let them go, which is never fun. So that experience taught me a lot about management and taught me a lot about working with people, on an intimate level, and that eventually led to me moving to Canada, and then getting into the world of social media and working with some nonprofits, and led me down a path of digital marketing, which is where we land today.
Excellent. That sounds exciting, and we definitely have some similarities in our pasts, so that's cool, man. Okay, that sounds super exciting. So what, the first question I really love asking is what's your management philosophy? How do you look at management, and how do you think management?
That's a great question. For me, it's really, I wish it would be as simple as it's a simple formula that everyone can follow. And as you know full well, it's not. And I always look to what's really sort of helps with my own philosophy around this is looking at what I deem as great leaders and great managers that I've worked under. And what it comes down to really is, for me, how three elements. One is people, so really knowing and understanding people. The second is understanding self, and our individual role within that. And then the third is understanding communication and how to effectively communicate across different, whether it's departments, industries, people, discipline, skills. So, and technology, of course. So they're kind of the three, to me, is sort of a triangle of management, if you will. And if we can sort of attack each one of those effectively, then we'll do well in terms of being able to manage. And that self piece that I mentioned, also a big part of it for me is around the ability to inspire, and that's really leadership. Really is what I'm talking about. But that is a key component of being an effective manager.
Yep, that sounds super exciting. So I would definitely agree with a lot of those. I think personally, I always say that communication is the single most frequent behavior we engage in as human beings, right? And I think it's such a shame that fewer people actually spend time studying communication and improving communication. And even when you look at it, when people go to university and take a communication degree, it's crap, right? It doesn't actually talk much about communication. It's all general. It's all, it's probably high level to some extent, but it doesn't really go into what is human communication. How are you effective with people around you when you communicate, right? And I think as a manager, definitely that's the number one thing I felt that I learned the most, right? And that I benefited from the most, because when you improve your communication, it's not just in that company, right? It's just as much your friendships, your relationships, and everything that comes along with it. So 100% agree on that piece for sure.
Yeah, I completely resonate with that, Mads. What came to me when you said that was an experience I had. If I go back 6 years ago, I was stranded in Toronto. I was let go of my role as a project manager for HP due to the global recession. And I was on my way out anyway. I kind of felt that's where I was going with my career. But what happened was I ended up taking up a 100% commission sales role, walking on the streets of Toronto in the winter, minus 30 degrees, snowing, knocking on 30 doors a day and getting rejected 99% of the time. And I really learned about difference between communication styles and leadership, self-leadership in that role. And one thing that what you just said there, what came to me was the guy who was my mentor, who I learned from, his name's Leon. He has a very specific way of being, a specific way of showing up as a leader and training, and also doing the sales role, right? He was very effective at what he did. He was the number one seller in our team. And I was essentially modeling him. This is what we do. And we learn to manage, or we learn to lead. We tend to model, the people who are leading us. And I very quickly learned that management style, the leadership style that he had, and the sales style that he had was not me. And I wasn't getting the same results. And so my director at the time said to me, you can't be Leon, you have to be Anf, right? Like, you have to be the guy that shows up as you and be authentic and vulnerable and real, no BS, and just speak to people like you normally would, right? And once I sort of took that philosophy and sort of embodied that, my results shifted, and I was getting, going from 0 sales a week to 3 sales a week, and nothing more. And it wasn't because I applied so much on the technical skill of selling. It was more really because of that shift of psychology. So that's an interesting lesson.
Yeah, I love it. And 100%, that's exactly what I teach managers, right? Like, everyone's like, they're looking up to people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and people like that. And they're like, wow, they're so great, I want to be like them. And the thing is, when you try and be someone you're not, like, obviously there's some people that have similarities with these guys and similar behaviors, but most people don't. And the thing is, when you're trying to be someone that you're not, particularly if it makes you uncomfortable, you're never going to be good at it, right? Like, if you want to be like Elon Musk and calling up your employees at 3 a.m. in the morning because there's a problem and, that kind of thing, like, the way he pushes people, the way he is with people in general, like, if you're not like him, you will feel so uncomfortable trying to be like him. And fundamentally, you're going to end up being super ineffective, right? Like, being 10% of what he is in the wrong areas isn't what's going to make the difference, right? The difference is really going to come from you really getting to know yourself, right? And I primarily teach it to the DISC framework, where basically people learn to understand their own strengths and limitations and communication styles, etc. Because I think fundamentally, like, I even think self-learning is more important than, learning how to learning the strength and weakness of others. Because, like, even as a good manager, if you can really hone in on your key strength and really utilize that to, push yourself and the team forward, and that really just make things so much easier, right? So it sounds like you definitely have a similar revelation with the sales role. Absolutely. Yep. 100%. Excellent. Wow. And I'm jealous. I mean, I wish walking around in minus 30 degrees, yeah.
It's not, I don't know. You're crazy, man. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
That's no, I'm not that jealous, but it sounds like an adventure at least. So.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I approached it. Thankfully, it only lasted 3 months, but I learned a lot.
Good. Yeah, I think when you first start with new roles, like I see it happen to people all the time, right? You have all these young people who take an education, they then get out and get a job, and then they realize, oh shit, I hate this stuff, right? And I always feel it's such a shame. Like it's probably different in some countries, but in Denmark, where I'm from, you get paid to study. So like a lot of people kind of take some random education. They don't really know much about it. And, they end up with a degree and they realize they don't like it. So they go take another one. Right. But I think even in the US and in places where you actually pay for the education, I really feel it's such a shame people don't get to test it first. Right. Because when you get out there and do it, like even at a lower level, you get a much better view into what it actually is. Right. So it's, yeah.
Sorry to jump in there. That's a very, very powerful point, and I'm with you on the education system. I paid for, I grew up in Australia, so I paid for my education, my tertiary education, and I came out with, I don't know, $20,000 or $30,000 in debt by the time I graduated. But if we look at what did I actually learn from that, right? It was the things that happened outside of the classroom. It was actually more about what I was doing on a basketball court and connecting with people and leading the team there. Or I got into Counter-Strike in a big way around the time I graduated, and was running strategies inside the game, with some of my mates, and we were playing these games like just ridiculous. But we were all single and had nothing to do, so we played games all night and all day, But what I really liked about it was the strategic piece and looking at how do we win the wars, how do we win the battles, how do we align the resources so we get the best opportunity to win each round. And these, it's like, I think I learned more. It's a bit weird for me to say this, but I always feel like I learned more playing those games than I did in some of the classes at university, right? I'm with you. I think there's nothing that can really beat real world experience. Like, even if you read 100 psychology books or leadership books, it's very different when you have to go out and lead real people in real situations.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we have a lot more in common than I initially expected. So I've been on the same train. So we also did play a bunch of Counter-Strike, and for me it was the same thing. Like I loved the team aspect, I loved all that stuff. It wasn't, the individual plays was what it was, right? But for me it was always the team aspect. And actually, when I was probably only about 15, I played a game called Diablo.
Yes.
Big clan things, and I remember, like at the time, I found it very natural, and I remember going. Like I was only 15 at the time, so I kind of had to get my parents' approval to go meet everyone and stuff. But we basically had a meetup with like 60 people, and I realized I was 15, and the second youngest was 19 or something. And like most people I was actually playing with on a daily basis was 30, 35, 40 years old, and like very quickly I found myself as the clan leader, and it was really, really interesting dynamics at the age, right? Because I hadn't expected age was not one of those things you would talk about very frequently, right? Like I kind of noticed people mentioning their boyfriends and girlfriends, and some of them had kids and stuff, but it never came out. And it was like that real life experience. I definitely like sort of getting in the management game. Like I could draw on that like significantly, right? And I totally agree with you with that real life experience. Like it doesn't really matter that much where you get it. And I'd say actually, so I run an outsourcing business where sort of one of the criteria we love looking for when we're hiring virtual assistants is gamers. So for various reasons, it's both the community role, but it's also the fact that gamers are generally very good with computers. They're generally very fast. They're not sitting like typing with a 2-finger system, because then you wouldn't win any game in the world. So yeah.
I love that. That's really cool.
So that's that's good. That's good. And what do you think? Like, obviously, you moved around various countries as well. How do you feel that impacted you?
Yeah. So I got married. So I'll take you back 4 years ago when I met my now wife, and after we got married, we then decided to become nomads and do the whole digital nomad thing. So we traveled for 18 months with our laptops and worked building at now it's Owl, but it was my digital agency. We had a content writing team, 5 writers, 2 editors, and we did this remotely. And I learned a lot during that time just about the dynamics and the challenges of remote work and remote leadership. And it looks good, and it's everyone gets sucked in by the Instagram pictures and everything like that. But the reality is very different. Like, I literally had to shut down part of my business because of just the difficulty of managing clients in specific time zones. Like, a lot of our clients were in Australia. We were, at one point we were in Asia, another part we were in Canada. And we just, in between all that, we were on flights and trying to move between locations and find Wi-Fi and stable internet and working out where we're going to live and all these things. And we learned very quickly that it's one thing to live a nomadic lifestyle, but it's another to build a business at the same time and to do that effectively. And it really comes down to having effective systems in place, having the right team members, on board, or the right leadership team, and then also having just really good communication channels with your clients and being clear on expectations. That's the thing. Just because you're moving around doesn't mean your clients are, and they're expecting the results. They want delivery on time, on schedule, within budget, and these sort of things. And for us, that became a really challenging part of the process. Okay, so I've learned a lot about that, and that kind of led to this summit that we just put together, the Remote Business Summit, last week. And we essentially wanted to invite practitioners who are building remote teams, who are advocates for remote work, everything from legal through to sales and marketing, through HR and recruitment, all of those different aspects, to talk about these challenges. So because I had experienced that myself, but then I wanted to see, okay, what's the difference between someone who has a team of 5 contractors to someone maybe like you, who has a lot more than that. And then we've had some people who had teams of hundreds of remote workers. So we wanted to understand, what were the challenges as you begin to scale, and that's what we brought as part of the summit.
And I love how that ties in, because exactly, I've been a digital nomad as well now for a long time, right? And what I love the most, how that ties into the conversation, is the fact that it comes back down to communication, right? Like, communication and expectation setting. If you want to do it successfully, it is so critical, right? Most people think they can kind of, hide and no one will know and stuff, right? That's just when you're traveling around, particularly Asia, there's so much stuff that will just happen, right? So you have to make very, very sure that you have so clear expectations with clients and so on. And you have to, I generally do what I call slow matting, which means a lot of the time we travel around fairly slowly. So stay somewhere 2, 3, 4 months maybe. So, we get settled in and so on. And I'm very good I've learned to become very good at managing my calendar, so that I have sort of good expectations to myself, like when I'm really, pushing, when I'm really delivering, and sort of when there's periods where, things might not be so good because we are traveling a lot or things are changing a lot, etc. Right. But again, for me, the fundamentals, it still comes down to critical communication with your clients.
Yeah, and that's spot on. One of the speakers we had on the summit was, her name's Kimberly, and she is an expert in HR, particularly for remote teams. And what she shared was quite insightful in the sense that she said, people think about remote management as if you're having problems with your culture and building a remote culture, often we tend to think of it as it's an issue with the technology or the tools that we're using to communicate or these sort of things. But it's really that's an easy scapegoat. What it does more than anything else, it actually highlights the flaws that you already have within your culture, right? So if you are already if your culture is one that's not already open, then by making it remote is not going to resolve that problem. What it does, it actually just makes it worse, and people can see that you don't have an open culture. So if some of your employees start to they're not showing up to work anymore, or they're not submitting their reports, or they're not jumping on Slack and communicating with you, it's easy for them on the other end just to say, hey, I'm sick today, or make up some bullshit, but you won't know, and the next thing you know, you're getting a resignation, or they just disappear. Like, this is very common. Freelancers disappear and you don't hear from them, but you still got a project you need to deliver. So and one of the things that Kimmy talks about, and also Liam Martin, who's the co-founder of Time Doctor and running remote, he basically talked about that, because he's got about 240 staff remotely right now. And he said, one question I asked to him was around the tool that he's got. Basically, Time Doctor is a time tracking tool. I'm using, I don't know if that's what you use, but I'm using, what's the one I've got Toggle. He's built Time Doctor, and one thing I said to him was, well, essentially what you're doing is you're giving business owners or managers this tool which allows people to track their time, and you maybe can pull all that data and you can see who's working and not working. But that's really, isn't that micromanagement? Isn't that, like for me, I hate being micromanaged in that way. I don't like someone telling me to track my time, right? But he raised a really good argument against that and said, well, here's the thing. If you as the leader make it transparent that all the employees can also view the leader's time, right? So now everyone has access to everyone's time reports. Then that's an open culture, and very different to one where the intention is we're just going to track you because we don't trust you, right? So it really comes back to what you said earlier about communication, and then what is the type of culture that you're trying to build within your organization, right? And you need to start at that point. What are the key values, right? Because if transparency is not one of those values, then being remote will only highlight that even more, and you're going to have major issues trying to build that team.
Yeah, 100%. I know Liam pretty well, and I've used Time Doctor for many years. So a couple of key points on that one, actually. So I work with a lot of agencies, for example, and the benefit for them in doing time tracking is not so much like tracking the time, making sure people work, because again, that should happen no matter what, right? But actually, it's more getting clear understanding of cost. Because when you're running an agency, you very often don't have a good view on how much time is actually being dedicated to individual clients. And often the ones who shout loudest get the most and all that sort of thing, right? But when you start tracking time, and when you start saying, okay, if people pay us $1,000 a month, we will give them X amount of hours each month. When you know that, and when you have a good framework for that, that actually helps you secure that your clients are getting a fair treatment. They're all getting what they pay for, and you don't sort of have like totally unexpected. Wow, I didn't expect we spend 40 hours on this one thing. I thought that was a 5-minute job, right? So totally get where you're coming from, and I agree in most cases, but there's definitely use cases where it can be very beneficial. And fundamentally, even when I started out in management myself, like I would actually track my own time a lot, because I think most people don't know where the time goes, and I'm a sort of big fan of Drucker and sort of his management views, and he talks a lot about that sort of like get to understand where's your time going. And because most people say they have one priority, but when you look at the calendar, it's like the calendar is full of with everything else than their priority, right? So I think learning time management, or I don't even call it time management, I call it priority management. I think that's critical for business owner success, and really tracking time. If you're using it the right way, I think it can be a very, very powerful tool. Right now, from our outsourcing business, we do also use it to track time, because again, for us, a lot of clients are very curious about making sure they get what they pay for. I respect that to some level. I don't necessarily agree with the focus they have when they focus like that, but that's often the case with clients, right? But I think fundamentally, like, getting the right view of why you're doing it. If you're solely doing it because you don't trust your staff, then you haven't really built a good culture, right? And I think that's the fundamentals.
Yeah, Peter Drucker, I mean, I've got his quote here on my desktop, what gets measured gets managed, that one that everyone talks about.
Exactly.
And I'm with you on that. Like, I think resource allocation and understanding how you are allocating your resources is critical to profitability, right? So if you don't know, and this is something I faced with our content agency, was I would do a task first, because the way I started off with was I was copywriting first, and I was doing blogs and articles as a freelancer, and then got to a point where I was at capacity, and then I thought, okay, well, in order to grow this, I need to actually grow the team. So I hired my first copywriter. But what I then noticed was, wait a minute, something that would take me 3 hours was taking this person 6 hours. What's going on? And the only way I knew that was because I was looking at the time tracker, right? And then I started to ask my team, as we grew the team, to actually start tracking their time and submitting time reports. And I had to explain to them, it's not because I'm managing you like in that way and I don't trust you. It's I want to understand how can we get more efficient, and what's our actual true capacity. So if I'm going out there and selling a service, that we can actually deliver that. Because I think one big problem, particularly with small business, is we can really over promise and under deliver, and then we suffer, right? Because then we lose credibility. We have all kinds of problems with the business and the brand, and that's something that time tracking specifically and resource management and resource allocation has been able to help me to do. And one of my clients that really well is Being Ninjas, and like I learned a lot of that from Merrill, who's the CEO, and Wayne, because they are very good at utilizing Reich, is the project management tool that they're using. And using that because of its resource allocation and resource management capabilities, right? Something like an Asana or a Trello doesn't really have that level of detail. I think Asana is probably trying to get there, but what we are able to pull from each individual is, and I can run my own reports just on my time, because I'm tracking it. Like every task or activity I'm doing, I'm tracking that. I can budget time in the same way that we would budget money or funds, like towards a marketing or sales campaign. We can actually say, well, Anfernee works 15 hours a week. What's the best way to allocate that time for that particular resource? And then we actually track against the reality, which is, actually what I thought would take 4 hours took 5 hours or whatever it may be. And the biggest challenge as the manager, and because I work with, I've got content people now that work under me, and I basically manage their time. And so I have to really understand, where our project's being delayed, where can we actually deliver more training, and I'm working with my writers and my editors to understand, hey, look, I see this is taking you, X amount of hours. Why do you feel that's the case? And where we can actually, it allows us to have conversations around how do we improve as an organization, and that's the key.
Yeah. And it's like, I work a lot with SEO companies as an example, right? And it's so interesting working with them because they, like most SEOs, are very detail-oriented perfectionists, right? And very often with anything they do, they have this 20 million step checklist. And I'm like, wait a minute, if a client is paying you $500 or $1,000 a month, right? Like your goal is not to go through a checklist and check off like 7 million boxes. Your goal is to actually provide a great ROI for them within a short period of time. So instead of doing everything all the time, you really want to have, actually your skill set is developing an understanding and saying, what's the 80-20? Where do I get the biggest bang for buck very quickly, right? Because if you have a checklist that takes you 6 months to complete, and after 6 months they start seeing some benefits, but those benefits are actually in reality coming from 10 or 20% of those items that you've gone through, like you've really spent a lot of their money on delivering not a lot of results, right? And that ability to sort of look at 80-20, I think generally from an agency standpoint, right, is really critical.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it's easy for agencies specifically to get caught in focusing on the wrong thing. And I'm not going to say it is only limited to agencies, but I definitely have experience in that world. I think it's just a case of focus. And we have to learn as leaders and managers and business owners where to focus our time and energy. And if we're always caught, this is the biggest challenge I had from going from freelancer to business owner, was understanding where I really needed to focus that time, right? And so the shift started to occur to, okay, well, first of all, if I'm going to bring people on, I need all these processes documented. I need to have training videos for the staff. So that's more consistent, because at the beginning, I'm just training one person at a time, and it's not, people pick up what they pick up. But if you have a clearly documented SOP, and you might not have a 1,000-point checklist, but certainly if at least taking the step of documenting the process and then reviewing it with the goal of how do we simplify and reduce it, not increase it, and still get a similar level output or improved output, then like speaks to what you're talking about, and it's making sure that we actually get the result for the client at the end of the day, and we can't lose focus on that if we're in business.
Yeah, definitely. Right, that's good. Any particular thoughts on, like, a lot of the people I work with, right? One of the first things they say when they come to me is always like, "Oh, I don't like managing people." How did you experience your management growth? Like, did you enjoy it from the beginning, or did you find it tough in the start, or how have you sort of been through that journey?
So I can give you the cheat answer and say I was naturally gifted that way, but that's not the answer. Essentially, for me, I had to learn how to become a better manager and a better leader, right? Like for me, I went from being the subject matter expert, within a specific role and a specific function inside of HP. I then applied for, when the manager opportunity came along, I went head to head against a colleague of mine who had actually been in the company a little longer than I was. So if they were hiring just on tenure, then I would have lost. But the reason I actually won and got the role was the feedback given to me was because of how I had already naturally built relationships with the people in the team. And this is the interesting thing, sort of the follow-on effect of that was, I think about 7 years later, that particular individual came back to me. He was going for a role as a director at EY. And he basically said to me, I need to learn how to play the social game, because, I've done as much as I can from a skill level and a subject matter expert level, but the directors aren't looking at me because I don't go to drinks with them. I don't have those coffee meetings and these sort of things. I know nothing about who they are, and they know nothing about me. And that's really, if there's one takeaway I would give to anyone listening to this conversation now, is really focus on your social skills, and not only just the ability to sit down with someone who's above your level, at your level, and have a human conversation, but also looking at yourself and understanding, where are your blind spots, where are your strengths, and a really good, you mentioned DISC earlier, another good profiling system that I would recommend it's one called Talent Dynamics, and this is a really good. There's another one called Wealth Dynamics, but they're kind of the same thing, and it really helps you to understand and uncover, based on your personality, your skill sets, your experience, where you what's the best role you should be in. And the sad thing I see is particularly in a lot of, you mentioned SEOs and people like that, a lot of developers, usually we promote people based on how long they've been in a company. Like, okay, Mark's been a developer for us for the last 10 years. We're going to make Mark the manager. And that's essentially what happened to me. And it's like, well, I don't have the experience I don't know how to manage people. And I didn't like it at first. Like your question, did I love it? No. I had to learn. I love people and talking to people, but performance reviews, I hated. Like that was not, I had to learn that process and learn how to do it effectively. And somewhere along my career, what happened was I ended up working for a co-working space. It's one of Australia's largest co-working spaces. For a couple of years as their marketing manager. And what I learned from that was when you shift from being the manager and the person of authority to being a coach and a mentor, the way you relate to your employees and the people that you're leading changes, both for you and for them, right? So now I'm not focused necessarily on, hey, here's the 10 things you should be doing and you're doing these wrong. What we're looking at is, hey, maybe these were the KPIs we agreed upon when you came into the role and last quarter or whatever the time duration is. And okay, you hit those two, wonderful. That one you didn't quite get. Why do you think that occurred? And how can I support you to make sure that happens next time? And so it actually, the shifting of the focus and the shifting of the conversation and how we communicate determines, and the type of questions we ask determines what kind of results we get from the people we're working with. And a big, a big tool in my toolkit that has helped me do this is NLP. So neuro-linguistic programming was something that I did a sort of master's training maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, but that stayed with me for life. Like that's all about just understanding what are our patterns of belief, what are the behaviors that we exhibit, how to be self-aware, but also be aware of those in others, right? And then be able to reflect those back to them and say, look, and this is what I'm observing from you, and is this, it could be wrong, but it could be, but in most cases, it's people are very open to being given constructive feedback and positive feedback, right? It's only when we approach it as trying to beat someone with a stick for doing something wrong, that's when typically we don't respond too well. Like for me, I don't like that. I don't like someone telling me, hey, you screwed up. But if it's more around, this is what we agreed to achieve and you didn't achieve this, like what came up for you and how can we sort of work together to improve that? I'm open for that conversation, right? So yeah.
No, that's really good. And I think like fundamentally for me, like I really like the high level mindset of, being able to really take that to the next level, like being able to look at individuals and really look at their skill sets, look at their strength and really communicate well with them, both when they fail and they succeed. So I find it really important to understand people because just like you said, some people, you have to be very careful when you give them feedback. Some people it's the opposite. Like some people you have to be, really, really firm for them to respect it enough, right? Like a lot of people, everyone have different ways, right? But for a lot of people that I've worked with, particularly corporate, like a lot of the time they were used to like a certain firmness, and that was one of the things I struggled the most with in the beginning, right? Because I was trying to be nice and polite and a bit like you said, like doing performance reviews was scary and stuff. But I very quickly figured out that some people need it in different ways. Some people you really tiptoe around, and some people, like for them to take it serious, you have to really sit down with them and not start screaming, but you have to be very, very firm, right?
Yeah. I was going to say that, like, I love that you said that because it goes back to what I like. For me, it's about bringing data, bringing facts to the table when you're being firm. Because it's one thing for you to say, look, as your leader or as your manager, I feel that you're not doing good in this area, but like here's an assumption. But if you remove the assumptions and just deliver the data and the facts and say, look, this was the KPI, this was the metric, this is what was achieved. Okay, help me understand what happened. All right, and that's there's no rebuttal. Like someone who's on the other side of that cannot say, oh, the numbers are wrong. Like, I mean, like that's it's very hard to do that, right? So it's the approach to providing feedback that's important, and that's what you're highlighting.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's really interesting, and I really like how you got into it and so on. And it's exactly like most people. Like I always sort of frame it the same way, but fundamentally the thing is, when you're not good at something, you generally don't like it. So the reason why most people start a business is generally because they learn a skill, they become good at something, they start liking it. And for me, management is the same. I mean, there's very few people who are naturally just good at management, and even if they learned it, for example, playing computer games or doing things where they naturally where they develop some of the skills without actually thinking so much about it, right? But really that ability to sit down and learn a skill, like most people, if they, if you can figure out social media, if you can figure out like becoming an SEO, like management ain't that complex, right? There's obviously a lot of nuances to it, and there's a lot of things you can and cannot do. But like, again, if you look at it from an 80-20 standpoint, like if you're already a business owner, you already have a lot of the logical mindsets. But taking that next step of really learning management is critical for the success. And that's actually where I keep beating up businesses for this, because I see so many large corporations, even like HP and the likes, where they just aren't investing. Like they promote people into a new role and they aren't actually investing in their skill set. And I find it mind-boggling that they'll hire someone for a developer and they'll train them for 2 months, but they give someone a managerial position and they're kind of like, okay, on Monday you're manager, here you go. And I'm not sure what your experience is with that, but definitely from my side, I see it like constantly.
Yeah, no, I've experienced that, and I've seen that, and I see that any size of business, small business through to corporate. I've definitely seen the failure to acknowledge that leadership and management are very specific skill sets, and it's really difficult just to give someone an e-learning course and go away and sit on that for 4 weeks and come back and these people come back and they get all the ticks and 100% in the exam, but then you say, okay, go out there now and lead 3 people. And they're a real mess. There's something that I wanted to touch back on that you said, Mads, which is around, it reminded me of something one of my mentors, his name is Jeffrey Slater, and he's worked with all sizes of organizations, and he so I learned coaching through him, and he basically shared with me this concept or this idea that still resonates, which is that your clients will always hide behind your shadows. And I will tweak that a little bit for this conversation and say your team members and your staff will always hide behind your shadows. And what that means is that if you have a fear, right, if you do not address a specific weakness in your ability to communicate or your ability to show up in a certain way, courageously or fearlessly or whatever it is, for your team members, then they will do the same and reflect that back to you. Right? Like if you're not willing to open a door with transparency and say, hey, I'm not having a great week, and like, it doesn't mean you have to share everything that's going on in your life, because you might have some personal challenges going on and whatnot. But certainly if you, a lot of times it's not what we say, but it's how we show up and what we do. And then other people that are sort of working with us, they pick up on that energetically. They pick up on that without verbalizing it. And even if it's remotely, this still comes through, because, if you're not showing up on time for your clients or showing up on time for meetings with your team members, right, they can pick up on that. And we train people to relate to us, right? So this is a sort of a Dr. Phil quote, but it's really this idea of that's really the work of the manager and the leader, is to really understand how are we showing up for our people. Because if we are asking of our people things that we're not doing ourselves for them, they're not going to do it. Like, they're just not going to do it, and then we get frustrated and disappointed. But it's like you say, if you're not being firm when you need to be firm because that's what they need, then you're not going to get the result that you're looking for. They're not going to be opening the door. If you're not being vulnerable and you're asking them to be vulnerable with you, it's not going to work, right? So these are the things that we need to pay attention to.
And I mean, one of my sort of biggest point with most clients is start talking to your staff, like doing one-to-ones and those kind of sort of simple management processes. Like so many people struggle with it so much, right? And it's very interesting that the level of difference it does. And people are always like, oh, but when I talk with people, they won't open up to me. I'm like, are you opening up to them? And they're like, well, try it, right? And like from my point of view, like I've always sort of been pretty transparent, right? Like I'm not the type of person that hides stuff, but I think fundamentally that ability to show people what you want from them by showing it from yourself, that is really for me a big part of leadership, right? Like, again, like lead by example. Like if you expect people to tell you when they're going through a divorce or a tough time, like you have to do the same to them. Like if you can't be honest with them, but you're asking them to be honest with you, like that's not the way that's not the way the world works generally, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that we treat our personal lives a little differently than when we show up at work, and we try to compartmentalize, like this is work or business and this is personal life, and typically what happens is if you can't show up one way in one place, chances are you're not going to show up the same way in another place, and it's really interesting how that all works. But definitely I'm 100% with you. Like leading by example is really the key.
And I think so. I actually have the opposite problem. I would say I'm not sure if this is the best way of saying it, but I'm sometimes better at showing up at work with who I am than showing who I am at home, if that makes sense. So very often, like I spend a lot of, because I'm doing a lot of things very consciously, I really spend a lot of effort in my work. And I quite often, when I go home, I feel a little bit drained. Right. And I think very frequently, like I'm displaying let's call it a better version of myself at work, exactly because I am spending so much time trying to look at like the right way of doing things and so on. Right. So I definitely find that sometimes I'm a better me at work, which works well in that sense, but it's definitely interesting. And I've seen it over a period of time where, you know, I'm kind of sitting like, I would do this work-wise. Why am I not doing that at home?
I can relate to that. Like I literally had a meltdown 2 days ago with my wife in the room because of work-related, pressure and whatnot. And this is a huge part of like me being married and learning how to work with this other individual who's like my number one supporter, in life. And she can see that too, like echoing what you just said. Like it's easy for me to shop like my best self at work and be a certain type of person. And I find it sometimes hard being the same person with my wife. But I think if I break that down, what it is because our dynamic is a little different. Obviously, the stakes are higher at home, right? And
Definitely.
what I've learned to sort of put some focus and attention on this year is to really look at where am I investing my time and energy, because I don't want to show up at home with the least energy for the person actually supporting me the most, because it's only a matter of time before that person leaves, right? Like it's, and I've seen this with other entrepreneurs, I've seen this with other managers and leaders, where we sort of, particularly, I don't want to say it's a male-female thing, but in my world, in my reality, it's mainly men that have this issue, is we fully go 100% at the mission or the purpose, whatever it is we're trying to build, and we tend to neglect the wife or the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the family, the kids, whatever it may be, the parents, right? And I think, I'm glad we're talking about this, because what I'm starting to understand and realize and talking to people like Wayne from Being Ninjas is, no, you do need to find that balance. And it's not always going to be a equal balance across all parts, all areas of your life, because it's what Richard Branson says. It's actually an integration of parts, and so you need to understand. Okay, well, where is your highest value? Where is your highest self? And if you're feeling, say in your situation, Mads, or in my situation where I'm feeling like shit, I'm neglecting my wife here. I need to be conscious about that, and I need to actually take actions to change that. And I've started to do that. Like I've started to go, look, Saturday is date day, only for my wife. Laptop and phone is off, and just dedicating time and presence for her. Because she complained for like 2 years, right? And literally got to the point where I'm going, oh my gosh, do we need to go to therapy and these sort of things? And then I realized, like, awakening for myself was, if I lose my wife, the business doesn't mean anything to me. Yeah. Like, what's the point of creating a successful $1 million company if the person I want to celebrate it with isn't there to celebrate it with? You know what I mean? Like that's. That's the reality of it. So we have to really evaluate that as leaders as well.
And I think, for me, it's more, it's often one of these things, and I think that's probably a childhood thing, but, I think for me, like when I was younger, like my parents would never talk about work at home. So I've always just been used to, like, I don't bring work stuff home because work stuff stays at work. And I think sometimes that can actually be super helpful. But sometimes, again, that kind of, it does the opposite of what we were saying with openness, right? The challenge is that if you are struggling with something that is running around your head all the time, and your significant others doesn't know what it is, so doesn't, you haven't made it clear that, this thing is running around your head, and, they're feeling lack of attention or whatever, like that's not good either. So you definitely need to find a good balance, and you need to be able to share enough to make the other person understand well, right?
Yeah. So something that's really helped me, and like I 100% credit my wife for this, is just scheduling time in. Like I would schedule meetings with my team members or my leaders or whatever it may be, and just going, okay, here's some time to work on the relationship. Now for you, like I had a similar thing in my family growing up. My parents really didn't talk about work much. And the other issue we had was they didn't really talk about money, right? Like that was something that we never spoke about in my family. And that's caused a lot of problems for me as an adult. And something I've been having to work through is just money mindsets. And like I'm a massive spender. My wife is a saver, and she's the investor. And I'm learning from her, like these are the things that I need to address, right? But like anything where we put attention and energy to and focus on, that grows. But if we don't do that and we avoid and run away from it and neglect it, it's just going to get worse. So I've had to consciously sit down and say, okay, well, what are the different buckets in my life, and where do I sort of put time and energy towards, and okay, look, this month maybe we've got a launch of a product or a service or something. I have to spend a lot of time there, but next month or the following month, I have to sort of swing the pendulum the other way and go, okay, I'm going to spend more time on a relationship and family, right? So like it's an ongoing learning process. Like there's no real one answer for this, as you know, Mads, but it's as leaders, again, back to that idea of you have to show up for your people and not just showing up as the stoic, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator at work, like I'm just all business. What people want to see is, who are you as a human being, right? Yeah. How do you show up as that kind of leader? Because that's the leader they're going to connect with, right? And when we come to work with empathy and we say, look, I totally get it. You're sick. Your mom's in the hospital bed. Look, be there for your mom, man. Like that's more important, and we'll find a way to deal with the work, because the work's always going to be there. It never disappears. All right. And so it's all parts, and we've got to play with juggling all these balls.
Yeah. No, definitely. That's amazing conversation, Anfernee. I think we're getting to the point where we want to round it up a little bit. If people are eager to get in contact with you or know more about you, like what's the best places and how do they best do that?
So I would just give probably the website is the first place I'd suggest, which is foundersconnect.co. Yep. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn. So I'm sure you can just drop that into the show notes, but Anfernee Chansamooth on LinkedIn, that's the best place to connect with me.
Excellent, man. Listen, it was a total pleasure talking with you today. So thanks a lot for joining me here on the show.
I appreciate it, Mads, and I love the space you've created for people to talk about management and leadership. I think your interviews are really profound, so thanks for the time.
Thank you for listening to the Mad Singers Management Podcast. Please leave a review. It means the world to us. You can also learn more about management at madsingers.com.